from our passage from today's sermon from Ecclesiastes chapter 11 and chapter 12. So I'll read from chapter 11, and for chapter 12, we'll alternate if the church can read the even verses of chapter 12. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 or even to 8, for you know not what disaster may happen on earth. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. As you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. In the morning sow your seed, and at evening withhold not your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good. Light is sweet, and it is pleasant in the eyes to see the sun. So if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them, but let him remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is vanity. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes, but know that all these things God will bring you into judgment. Remove vexation from your heart and put away pain from your body, for youth and the dawn of life are vanity. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Church. In the day when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men are bent, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those who look through the windows are dimmed, they are afraid also of what is high, and terrors are in the way. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags itself along, and desire fails, because man is going to his eternal home, and the mourners go about the streets. And the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs with great care. The words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. They are given by one shepherd. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. And together, for God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. This is the word of the Lord.
There are some mistakes that we can make in life that are so shocking that the experience, it stays with us. And whenever we find ourselves in a similar situation, we remember what happened in the past and we try our best not to repeat it. Thankfully, this has never happened to me, but I do remember an episode of the TV reality program Undercover Boss. And as I'm watching this episode, I thought to myself, make sure you never do what this manager did. If you're not familiar with the show, Undercover Boss is where the owner, a CEO, they disguise themselves and they take a position within the company that they normally would never do. And so maybe you can think of the CEO of McDonald's, that when you're going through your drive-through, that he's there and taking your order. And so that's what the basic premise is. It provides the boss of a company a unique perspective. Because if they're in their suit, their attire, and they say, "What do you think of this company?" Of course, any employee will say, "Oh, this is the best. I want to stay here forever." But once you realize that you are dealing with someone different, maybe what you say changes. In one particular episode, we see that there is a manager, and he's responsible for taking on a new employee who is actually the boss in disguise. And what we discover is that this manager, he's unprofessional. He talks about people behind their back. He only works hard when people are looking. He complains to his employees, those under him, that he should be the one calling the shots, that he should be the one in charge. And at the conclusion of every episode, there is an opportunity where those who have interacted with the boss are able to see them in their everyday life. And so you could imagine the shock, the surprise of this manager when he walks into the room and he thinks about, "Oh no, what did I do? Here is my boss, but I thought they were a lowly employee. All of the stupid things that I've said, all of the times that I've been unprofessional." And so it is safe to say that they were quickly humbled, and hopefully this experience is not one that they will forget anytime soon. Hopefully this case of mistaken identity, it has never happened to you. If so, I'm sure it's something that you won't forget anytime soon. But I'm pretty sure that this is not a common experience. But I do think there is one area of our lives where something similar is happening more often than we realize. And that is in our relationship with God. If God were here today, if God were to walk into the back of our church, what would he see? What would he find us doing? Would our lives, our actions, our posture reflect that we have and we know him to be our creator? God is the one who endures forever. God is the one who spoke creation into being. And yet many times along the way, we fail to recognize and remember who he is. God enters and he speaks into our lives, and in our pride, in our arrogance, what do we say? "Thanks, God, but I think I've got this. I think I'm the king of my life. I think I am the queen of my life." Surely, we are confronted with our eventual mistake. We are humbled and we say, "God, I'm sorry. You are the rightful king of this world." But it isn't long before we find ourselves repeating the same mistake. In the opening verse of chapter 12, the author of the book of Ecclesiastes, he urges his audience to remember your Creator. When someone tells you to remember something, I think often our gut instinct is to say, "Why are you telling me this? I already know." I don't want to throw our forward reach children under the bus, but so often when we're giving kids talks, what happens? It's a very familiar passage. They put their hand up Yes, I know this story already. As though hearing it once um, means that we learn everything that we can about it, or that we don't need to remember a key truth. And so, yes, we may be familiar, we may know on one level, but it's also true that we forget. We need reminders along the way. For our manager in the Undercover Boss episode, for too long, he was unchecked. He was in a managerial position. He had let his power and authority get to his head, and he forgot. Actually, there is someone that I need to report to. I am not the boss. And so, when we as a congregation, when we as the people of God remember who God is, we are better able to carry out what the preacher instructs in his conclusion, that we are to fear God and to keep his commandments. Before we take a look at our passage today, I do want to give a brief outline of some of the chapters of Ecclesiastes. As Pastor Monique mentioned, over the weekend, many of our young adults, we spent time together exploring through some of the themes of this book. And as with many writings, the logic progresses. It builds on previous ideas as well. And in order for us to get a greater sense of what the preacher is talking about, we need context. In chapters 1 and 2 of the book, the preacher, the son of David, he does not mince his words, but from the get-go, he tells us everything is meaningless. Everything is vanity. Everything is hevel. Life, it is fleeting. It is like a mist. It is like chasing after the wind. This meaninglessness stems from the fact that we often find ourselves in cycles of life, that we are doing the same thing week in, week out. The outside may change, but what we do on a regular basis doesn't deviate that much. Maybe you've experienced this in your own life. You thought to yourself, after I graduated from uni, I want to go down this career path. You work, but you find it not satisfying, and you think, oh, you know what? I'm going to pursue my master's. I'm going to go down a completely different path. And yet some of the dread that we feel, some of the meaninglessness that we feel is common throughout. But the preacher, he will not just sit quietly, but he's on a quest. The first thing that we see in chapter 1 and 2 is that the preacher, he seeks meaning from wisdom. And he thinks, maybe if I pursue wisdom, this will give my life meaning. But no, it brings despair. He then tries pleasure. I'm going to try everything, have new experiences in life. I might be able to find joy, I might be able to find fulfillment, but the conclusion is the same. This too does not satisfy. Maybe work will give me satisfaction and joy, but we find that this too is vanity, striving after the wind, something that never satisfies. What is the reason for this? The preacher argues that ultimately it is because all of us, one day, we will die and that we can take nothing with us. Despite knowing this, our world, our flesh, our friends, our parents often try to get us, even ourselves, we think maybe money will be something that will endure, that even if I were to die, I can pass it on to my children. But one of the problems that the preacher addresses in chapter 5 of the book is that you don't know how the people after you will use your money, that they could squander it. And so money too is vanity. Not only that, but money will never satisfy. It leaves us wanting more and more and more. And despite what the world says, it brings anxiety. And so, wisdom, pleasure, toil, and money, these are all vanity. It is like striving after the wind. In chapter 7 and 9, we explored the theme of death. That not only will we all die one day, but we will have to stand before the Creator God and give an account of our lives. That we have to explain our rebellion against Him. The Bible tells us over and over again that all have said no to Him and are therefore deserving of eternal condemnation. But God, in His great mercy, what does He do? He sends His Son Jesus to take our place on the cross, to die the death that we deserve. For those who trust in Him as the only way to life, to salvation, we have been given a righteousness that is not our own. And so when we stand before God, we do not have to fear judgment, because the Bible tells us the judgment, the punishment that we deserve has already been paid, has already been poured out on Jesus. And so we are able to spend all of eternity worshiping and praising our God. We know where we want to be at the end of our lives. God has put eternity in our hearts. But you might be thinking, eternity in our death, that seems so far away, but I'm living here in the year 2026. What do I do between now and then? In the final 2 chapters of the book of Ecclesiastes, I think there are 3 principles, 3 realities that provide a framework that help guide and shape our choices and decisions. And the first principle is this: to just do something. We would imagine that because we have the end in mind, we know where we are today. Let's think about efficiency. Let's think about getting there in the quickest way possible. And so maybe that the preacher, he would leave us with an exhaustive list of rules, tips, recommendations, life hacks that you can get to your destination whenever you want. But to our surprise, one of the things that we see is that the preacher, he doesn't provide this. Rather, he says, just do something. What we see is in verse 4 of chapter 11, that it's possible to be so concerned with the environment, the situation around us, we're thinking, hey, there is wind. I'm going to farm, but there's no point farming because what's going to happen? The wind is going to blow the seeds, and so right now is not the right time to sow. That we do not put our hand to the harvest because we see that rain is about to come, and we think, what's the point of starting something when I'm just going to have to stop 30 minutes later? But there is a reality that we're told of in verse 5 and 6 of chapter 11. That we don't know what God will allow to prosper or what He will bring to failure. Let me say that again. We don't know what God will allow to prosper or to bring to failure. And contrary to what we think, this is meant to free us. I think of one very real example in the life of our church. Many, many years ago, our church made a decision to drive to very inland New South Wales to meet people that we barely know and to start a relationship where we could serve them, bless the people there. And in our human perspective, how easy would it be for us to think that this is a foolish endeavor? Don't you know you need to be in close proximity? Don't you know you need to meet regularly? This is never going to work. And yet, our church, we sent a team, we went out, and to our surprise, and to the glory of God, that relationship has prospered. We love our dear inland brothers and sisters. They come and visit us when they can. They join us in our camps. But I wonder, and I think, what if we were so paralyzed with the many options before us? Oh, this is never going to work. I don't know. Oh, there are reasons why this shouldn't work. No, this isn't wise. We're not being good stewards. But our church, we did something. But what we also see is there are instances where we try things and they do not bear fruit. But what should we do in those instances? We try again. Not because the result is contingent upon us, but it is our God who brings about the result. By no means are we to be reckless. By no means are we to ignore our ability to discern, to think, to weigh between different options. But we don't want to be paralyzed. We don't want to be so consumed with the many options before us that we never do anything. Just do something. And what we see in our second principle, second reality, is that judgment will come to all. Over the weekend, we spent a lot of time exploring the theme of death. And many of us, we don't like to think about death. Our society has done a very good job of trying to hide it, to keep it out of view. But it is helpful for us to be reminded that one day we will all die. In chapter 12, from verse 2 onwards, we see all of these illustrations to describe the aging nature of things and people. That one day when we get older, it will result in something. So often when we are confronted with the grind, the cycle of life, in our weakness we can think, I can't wait until this is all over. I can't wait until I die. That maybe death would be the escape. And that would be true if it weren't for the fact that there is judgment. We see this in verse 9 of chapter 11. That the preacher, he says to this young man, you have the option to go out, to do what you want, to follow your heart, but know that your actions, they have consequences. They will bring you into judgment. And so this is something that we need to reconcile with the short time that we have here on earth. You may be sitting here and believing that nothing happens to us after we die, but the Bible makes it very clear that only one of two things happens, that we will have eternal life with the Father, or that we will be in eternal condemnation. The idea of hell may seem disproportionate. The crime doesn't fit the punishment, and we feel like it is unfair. But one of the things that we fail to recognize is who the Creator God is and who we as creation are. But God, He gives us a way forward. The God of the Bible is one of grace. We're told that those who put their trust in Jesus, there is no more punishment. Yes, we may sin now, today, tomorrow, but we're covered by the perfect sacrifice of Jesus. His sacrifice covers all of our sins, past and present. Although this may sound alarming, this may sound scary, but it helps us to live in light of we're able to know in light of that decision the steps that we are to take today. And that leads us to our third and final point, our principle, and that is to remember your Creator in your youth. When I was a young lad, when I was at church and I would hear of many testimonies, stories of how people have chased after the wind and how they came to know Jesus much later in life, I, like many people, wanted a similar experience. I want to go out and I want to enjoy the pleasures of the world. And maybe when I'm a little bit older, maybe when I've had my fun, then I will come to Christ. As a now 34-year, not so young adult, I wish there was an opportunity for me to speak to my past self and maybe to those who find themselves in a similar position. And what I would say to my younger self: live for Jesus now. Live for Jesus now. Don't put it off. So often what we do is, in our immaturity, we think of life in binary terms. It's either yes or no, saved or not saved. But what we fail to take into consideration is that on this side of eternity, as God brings us out from the domain of darkness into the kingdom of His beloved Son, the issues, the sins that we have struggled with, they do not disappear overnight. Can someone who struggled with alcohol for 30 years be saved? Absolutely. Absolutely. Our God is a God of grace. But would life be a lot easier as a Christian if they never struggled in the first place? Definitely. And that is what the preacher wants and desires of us. Yes, our God is a God of grace. He is one of mercy. But so long as it depends on you, so long as you have the opportunity to remember your Creator and let that affect your trajectory, don't forget your Creator. And I think this is one of the beauties and one of the strengths of being part of a multi-generational church, that we have the opportunity to speak into one another's lives. We're able to share the stories of how God has worked. And so when we keep these three principles, these three realities in mind, that one, we are to just do something because our God is sovereign, that He is the one at work. That if we are to remember that judgment is coming and that God has decisively dealt with this. But also number three, that if we remember our Creator in our youth. I think this provides maybe not the most exhaustive, maybe not the most detailed framework that we want, but it is enough to start us. Even though I don't know exactly every single detail of my life, I don't know every single step that I will take, but I know where I want to be. I want to spend eternity with God. I know the things that I ought to do. And so remembering those three principles, those three realities, they help us to do what the preacher concludes his book with: to fear God and to keep His commands. And so, church, why don't we enter now into a time of reflection, into a time of prayer, thinking about our lives. What is it that we are living for? Where are we headed? You may be the type who is anxious and needs to know about all of the smaller details in life. How about we surrender to our God? Yes, we want to do something, we want to be wise, but ultimately there is a limit which we cannot surpass, and God will do His work. But at the same time, maybe we're sitting here and we're thinking that this is something that we can put off, that we can think about, dwell upon at a later stage. But judgment is there, and we're reminded of this in our death. And so our time here on earth is short, and maybe we need to maybe we need to do business with God. Maybe we need to think about where we are in our relationship with Him today. And so, church, I invite you to come into a time of reflection, of prayer, and then we will soon respond in song.